Greetings and good day, fellow brothers and sisters. Hope you're all doing great today. Today we're doing a bit of a different type of an update, more of a format issue because the video that I'm using right now is not working properly, and I wanted to get something out there, so I'm doing more of a podcast type style, recording into the computer at this point. And but it's important to stay posted on what's going on. And the events of that is happening around the world, and each week it's going to escalate more and more. And it's always amazing to hear and to read of the issues developing in Europe and the problems with the immigration and the migrants, and especially over this last several months, we're seeing more and more disastrous effects because of the increase of the migration issue. And it's not just a migration, it's the Islamic invasion, as we mentioned time and time again. You have countries like Sweden that have this effect right now that, for example, a court ruling that migrants can drive without a license if they, quote-unquote, lost their documents en route. Really? So these newly arrived migrants can enjoy at least a 2.5-year-old or more driving without any sort of license, putting themselves and others at risk thanks to the judgment of a Swedish court. This court, again, revolved around an arrest of a 22-year-old Bosnian man in September last year who was caught driving into the pub without any license by the officers. And so the man claimed that you can almost put, quote-unquote, lost his license 9 months earlier as he migrated to Sweden, but is unable to prove that he even had a license at all to begin with. And so the case went to the court system, and of course they ruled that, don't worry about it. So the prosecution called the man to produce evidence from Bosnia that he had ever passed a driving test, but he claimed that with the refugee, with the problems back in his homeland, he didn't want to alert the Bosnian government where he had escaped to. And again, the acquitted man, the court, and the impetus was on the prosecution to prove that he didn't have a driving license or driver's license at the time, but rather on the suspect that he did have one. And because the Sweden's driving laws, any migrant for this matter can claim they've lost their driver's license and they can't write home to get a new one sent within 12 months, or any period of time. So again, these refugees get a pass for whatever they want to do, whatever they want to get away with. And for example, if a similar offense took place with a native Sweden person, could expect fines of hundreds of dollars, equivalent to the currency there, of jail time and for repeated offenders. But this isn't the only case that the native Swedes are reduced to a second-class citizen status, paying with their tax money for the benefits that they have no hope to enjoy. For example, last year, the decision of the Swedes' nationalized rail network no longer requires migrants to purchase and present train tickets. The policy proved so popular with the Sweden's new population that the rail company was even obliged to put an extra train line to cope with the demands. Another issue in dealing with the refugees, for example, these Muslim refugees in a Hungarian camp stoned officers because the internet was not working. So you see this unprecedented, uncivilized behavior, which is just unacceptable. But they get all upset because the internet's not working. So they want the blessings of all these countries without putting any interest back into it or payment. They just want to soak the system for what they can get. And if something that's not going their way, they're going to riot and cause a lot more issues. And in this case, because the internet wasn't working, they ended up stoning and rioting the police. Other issues within the Muslim invaders are, for example, this pool that happened, and this came out of a blog in Germany, talking about the Muslim invaders defecating and ejaculating in the pool, as well as sexually harassing some of the German girls. So these are some of the reports that are happening because of these migration issues. You see this behaviors that are going on that is just uncivilized within any country, but we're seeing more and more of these type of reports happening all throughout Europe. Speaking of Germany, the German rebellion, for example, 90% of Merkel's own voters reject her asylum. This came out of a German blog as well called WELD.de. And other reports have the very similar poll numbers. About 90% of the voters reject her asylum policy, and 79% of the entire German population is in favor of tightening the migration policy. So the problem is with most of these countries, kind of like the United States, the policies of the president, the policies of the German chancellor here, it destroys the country. So their policies are not going to help the country out. In fact, it destroys the country. And here you see 90% of the people reject what she is wanting to do. And speaking of migration, out of another report of the UK Express talks about that the ISIS is pledging to invade and conquer Spain now. So again, continue with that Islamic invasion, but they had this report that wanting to invade Spain now. So again, they're trying to migrate to all the different countries around Europe, and so Spain is next on their agenda. The U.S., according to another report at the Zero Hedge on Wednesday, said that the U.S. is at the center of the global economic meltdown. So while the economic implosion progresses this year, there will be considerable misdirection and disinformation as to what the true nature of what has taken place. Back in the 1930s, the masses were so ill-informed by the mainstream media that the Great Depression, that most people had no idea what was actually happening in the midst of an official depression until years after it began. So the course of an economic journalist of the day made sure to argue consistently that the recovery is just around the corner. So that was kind of a phrase that was repeated time and again. In a similar way, in our current direction, which is leading to a Great Depression, has been no different, but something that is about to change. You see, unlike the Great Depression, the social crisis will eventually collapse the economic crisis. For example, what is taking place in Europe with all the migration issue, because it is the national security issue, it is a health issue, it will create more of a crisis than ever before that the world's ever seen, for that matter. But that's to say that the society today is so also ill-equipped to deal with the financial collapse that will eventually inevitably trigger a cultural upheaval and violent internal conflict. And again, the U.S. is the number one consumer market in the world with over 29% of the share and 21% share of its energy use, despite having only 5% of the world's population. So if there is a global shutdown in consumption, manufacturing, exports, and imports, the first place to look would be America, as this would be one of those starts. But again, other countries around the world are gripped by this as well. But we'll see a major impact within the U.S. within this year, within the next several months, most likely. Also, on dealing with an issue in the Middle East, Iran has prepared almost 200,000 young men in countries around the Middle East to help with the arrival of the Mahdi. This came out of the ibtimes.com, an article in preparing Iran preparing for Armageddon is the question that starts with this particular article. Islamic Republic-backed Shiites in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, and Yemen. And as we stated in the past year, that there's going to be more of this increase, especially with the Islamic invasion. The world domination is what they really want to do. But we start to see more of these stories taking place and what is happening in the Middle East. On another sort of issue that is going to increase throughout the U.S. specifically, but on a transgender issue, but a judge rules employer must pay $115,000 to transgender over bathroom dispute. This came out of the Christian Post on Saturday. There is a judge in Minnesota that has ruled that the national check printing company that must pay $115,000 and apologize to a transgender woman for banning her from using the women's restroom. The Minnesota-based Deluxe Financial Services Incorporated has been asked to pay that amount to the plaintiff, Brittany Austin, also to change its policies for transgender employees as part of the settlement of a sex discrimination and harassment lawsuit brought by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So there's other crazy news items, but I think you're starting to get the feel of every day there's more and more problems, more and more issues that are developing around the world, and so we need to be praying, staying close to Jesus, keeping our eyes on Jesus, stay in the Word, but pay attention to what's going on around the world. And there's a lot of news sources that you can grab some information just to equip yourself, but also it's an opportunity to witness to people as well, as we've said time and again. So that concludes today's update. God bless you.